What I'm going to be talking about, how AI fails people with disabilities, and how to fix it. It's a really super broad, exciting topic. I know that there's a lot of questions and thoughts that folks have, so absolutely do get those in the Q&A. I love questions and will leave as much time as I can for them. But before I get into that, let me talk a little bit about myself, give you some background as to who I am and what I do and why I'm the one giving this talk. First of all, a little bit of a physical description. I am a white male in my 30s with a beard and a mustache. Love the facial hair. Wearing a Fable branded t-shirt, Fable being the company that I work for. And I've also got my desk kind of to my left with a Ravenclaw emblem representing that, as well as a brailler behind me, as I am a completely blind screen reader user and have been for my entire life. At work, I am the Accessibility Evangelist at Fable, so I get to spend a lot of time giving talks like this one about the importance of accessibility, about some of the practical items of how it should better be done, and bringing my lived experience as well as the experience of the community of people with disabilities that I am incredibly privileged to work with at Fable to my talks, and really hoping to really center the voices of people with disabilities, because as they say, nothing about us without us. That said, as much as I love talking about me, enough about me. Let's get on to the content that you are all here for and the things that we'll be covering. So we'll be first of all, I want to start out by talking a little bit about the current reach of AI. And I also don't want to be all negative. So we're going to open up with some positive things. Some of the good that AI is currently doing for people with disabilities, before we really get on to some of those big problems that AI is causing, as well as kind of a couple of proposed solutions that we all need to keep in mind, and that if we do keep in mind, we can build the AI-powered incredible world that we would all like to see. That said, let's dive right in and talk a little bit about the current reach of AI. I know that a lot of us here are probably pretty technical folks and pretty on board with what's going on in the tech industry today. However, even to audiences like this one, when I talk about AI, often people think in a very futuristic way. They think about self-driving cars. They think about kind of the future technology that is to come. They think about large language models like, GPT-3 and the Jurassic AI models and some of the work that is being done there. But what they don't realize is that AI is not a future thing. It is a now thing. It is not something that is being tested in laboratories and that is being researched and that is sort of just starting to come out. It is a thing that is right here and that is right now. Companies are spending over 50 billion with a B US dollars a year on artificial intelligence. And that's not just in R&D labs. That's in actual practical things and developments that are taking place right now. One really excellent example is the use of AI for the screening of resumes. I mean, if you look at some of the employers that are doing this right here, right now, if you want a job at Hilton, at AT&T, at Procter & Gamble, at Procter & Gamble, at Capital One, Five Guys Burgers and Fries, just all kinds of companies who are using AI as part of the resume screening process, as part of the interviewing process, and as part of the selection process. And of course, AI for video analysis. Over the recent couple of years with COVID and the pandemic, this has absolutely exploded. Although even before that, it was a factor. AI is being used in videos to understand your mood, for sentiment analysis, in order to transcribe dialogue. Thankfully, here at AXCON, we are incredibly privileged to have live transcription that is going on and live ASL interpretation, as is so important, but that's not always possible, especially in a lot of online meetings. AI is being used for copyright enforcement. And what happens when we enforce copyright in ways that are not great, in ways that shouldn't be, that shouldn't perhaps be enforced? And it's being used to collect all kinds of data about us, just from watching our webcam and figuring out, are we paying attention in the meeting? Are we looking at something else? All of that kind of stuff. Of course, voice assistants is one of the things that when you say AI, some people will twig to that, oh, yeah, voice assistants, they're a thing, they're happening right now. But I think we wildly underestimate the use of voice assistants out in the general world. Right now, 97% of mobile users are using a voice assistant for something. And 40% of people in North America are interacting with their voice assistants in the home. So the Amazons and the Googles and the HomePod. And such. And of course, advertising. It was premiered way back in the day with Google AdSense and their interest-based advertising. This was a revolutionary new way to make ads more relevant, more clickable, and better for everyone. But today, contextual advertising powered by AI is being used by Facebook, Yahoo, Microsoft, Spotify, so many different companies. And of course, photo description and tagging, technology that was originally rolled out by search engines so that you could search for a photo of kittens and so that you could then, find those photos. It is now used by a lot of content management, CMS systems, in order to help authors and content creators pick stock photos that are most relevant to them. Sometimes it's even being used in the generation of stock photos. And of course, looking for not safe for work content. And what happens when an AI misjudges that? Perhaps because it is content from a minority group, perhaps because it is content about a sexual orientation that is not, considered by some people to be mainstream, and it gets misidentified as NSFW content and not described or not tagged or even not allowed through. And of course, those aren't the only places that artificial intelligence is being used right here, right now. AI interprets your medical results. It helps you plan your travel. It orders your search results. It recommends products, services, entertainment, music, television, movies, and all kinds of other experiences to you. So AI is here. It's now. And sometimes that's a good thing. There are a lot of immense positives that we are getting from artificial intelligence and a lot of improvement that is being made to the world. There was a great talk yesterday from Microsoft's head of accessibility about their efforts, not only on AI, but in accessibility in general. But, applications like Seeing AI have given those who may not be able to see real-time, smooth access to the visual world in ways that were not previously possible. From identifying products, scanning barcodes, OCRing text, to finding faces, describing scenes, helping with navigation. These are all uses of AI that are improving the world for millions of people. And of course, accurate voice recognition for those who may have physical challenges that prevent them from being able to fluidly and easily use a keyboard and mouse to type and to click. Voice recognition is a game changer. We have gone from voice recognition being something that is only available on a large, powerful desktop, something that needs hours and hours of training and of work in order to get that to work for someone, to something that is built in, to something that is easy to use, to something that is supported by the cloud. And if you are lucky enough, like myself and many other folks, to not have any difficulty speaking and to have that very standard Midwestern American accent, you can expect well over 90% accuracy from voice recognition AI, sometimes getting as high as 98 and 99% accuracy. And of course, smart products. providing access to those who can't read screens, to those who can't use visual controls. The smart home has been an incredible game changer for me. Thanks to my home assistant, thanks to AI, thanks to my smart assistant, it was only as recently as 4 years ago that I was able to set my own temperature in my house and to modify the temperature on my thermostat for the very first time. That I was able to put smart sensors so I'd actually know what the humidity level in my rooms was. That I was able to have a smart outdoor thermometer and get access to temperature data in my actual backyard for the first time. Ovens, cooking, power use, lights, all of these things are powered by AI-based experiences and are opening access to things that would otherwise have been very difficult or impossible. And of course, those with short-term or long-term physical challenges are also benefiting from the ability to control devices with voice, with gesture, to be able to set up routines and schedules and increase efficiency, all powered by artificial intelligence. And of course, recommendations, recommender systems. There is a lot of talk about how those are troublesome, how they can be problematic, and we're going to dig into that in just a little bit. But I wanted to take a minute to highlight the ways that recommendations offer faster access to products, to information, how helpful they are to those who find searching for products and information very difficult and time-consuming, or to those who, for one reason or another, simply may not know what is available and may not have great access and be able to find and to get that content for themselves in an easy and smooth way. But we've talked about these problems, about the positives, but unfortunately, with every positive, there comes a catch, and there comes a problem. And so let's dive into some of the problems that AI is causing us. First of all, most artificially intelligent systems have no concept whatsoever of accessibility, of disability, or of needs that differ. A great example is Steam, the game store by Valve. They do a great job of monitoring your playtime, of looking at what games you interact with, of looking at the things that interest you, and recommending new and upcoming games that you might be interested in. Unfortunately, they don't have any kind of accessibility as a data point. So whether you are someone who is blind and cannot see, or someone who requires ASL or transcripts, the AI model that Steam uses to recommend you games doesn't have those dimensions as a data point. And so unfortunately, instead of being something that saves you time and something that gives you great access to things that you may not have known about and helps you discover new and wonderful experiences, recommendations instead become noise and spam and something that is almost completely worthless to you because they do not take your needs into account. Similarly, Netflix, its AI models don't look at things like captions and audio description and take those into account. So if you are someone who cannot see or has difficulty hearing, a lot of the Netflix recommendations are not going to be of any use whatsoever to you. Reddit has a great recommendation system that they have just rolled out that is intending to recommend incredible, wonderful, delightful content to you that you may not have discovered. Unfortunately, to me as a screen reader user, it spends most of its time recommending images and video-based content that I can't see and can't interact with. So those wins that could otherwise be created by AI are lost. And of course, we have marketing and analytic systems that are powered by artificial intelligence that also don't account for disability. Was the ad uninteresting or irrelevant to me, or was it inaccessible to me? There is no way for the AI system to know, and so as people with disabilities are exposed to more and more ads, we find that the relevance drifts further and further away because the ads that we interact with are not the ads for products that we might be interested in purchasing. They are the ads that just so happen to be accessible. Those with unmet accessibility needs are locked out of data collection entirely. We are not represented in the marketing profiles. We are not represented in the interest profiles. We are not represented in any of the clusters. And so the recommendations, the ads, the things that the decisions that AI makes on our behalf become completely irrelevant. And of course, assistive technology can make data collection inaccurate. So much data collection is based on mouse movements, key presses, what happens when those are not what is expected, when those are not what is usual. And of course, some systems accidentally collect on and act on sensitive data. And AI, when it collects all of this data, can be accidentally identifying and clustering people into groups based on disability. I bet that YouTube and Spotify, with all of their recommendation and clustering algorithms, based on the content that I consume around screen readers, around blindness, around accessibility, I bet you that they could identify me as a blind person with 99% accuracy, even though I did not choose to disclose that information and may not want it disclosed and may not have wanted it taken into account. And of course, video-based systems. Eye movement is a very inaccurate metric for many, many people, whether it is because you are blind or low vision and are not looking in the same way as others, or because you have a physical or other disability that causes your eye movement to differ from what is expected. And this can have all kinds of impacts on you, whether it is the AI-based system telling your manager that you were totally checked out and not paying attention to anything that happened in the meeting, or the exam system saying that you were constantly looking down at something off screen and therefore must have been cheating. Use of micro-expressions highly disadvantages either those with physical challenges that make facial movements different from what is expected, or simply those who are not neurotypical, whose facial reactions either are not as pronounced or differ from the so-called average. And of course, the inability to accurately transcribe speech can seriously disadvantage those with difficulty speaking and those with physical challenges. Folks can be locked out of everything from meetings where they need to have things transcribed for others who require those transcriptions, to the use of voice assistants, to on-call support. How many telephone systems today have moved away from a system where you press 6 for sales and you are supposed to speak what you would like? And of course, image descriptions that have given us that positive. They have given us access to image-based information in a way that was not possible before. And yet that access comes with a lot of bias. It describes men and women very differently. If you look at some of the auto-generated descriptions of women, you tend to sometimes even get words like pretty, or words that mention physical description, hair color, eye color, whereas with men you get words like professional, wearing a suit, and so on. Of course, AI can misgender many individuals because a lot of our AI systems are still making assumptions about gender based on photos. Of course, AI fails to correctly describe ethnicities. Not only does it fail to describe ethnicities correctly, it can even misidentify some people of differing ethnicities not even as people. And of course, there's the over-identification of objects present in training data. A good example of this is the example that is frequently in the AI community called giraffing. Whenever people take pictures of a paddock with a fence around it, there's usually a giraffe or a sheep or some other animal that is in there, because that's why someone's taking the picture. Nobody's taking pictures of empty paddocks and empty fields. And so when you feed an AI system a picture of an empty field or an empty paddock that it is not expecting, it says, well, in 99% of all these other pictures, there was a giraffe here. So we're just going to go ahead and describe this photo as containing a giraffe, even though it doesn't. There have been a lot of efforts to overcome this in recent years, but it is still a problem. And of course, voice recognition. Even if you are not somebody who is unable to speak or has challenges speaking, voice recognition makes twice as many errors when it comes to understanding and transcribing marginalized accents or speech patterns. And it can block people out of obtaining the support that they need and of collaborating with people that they desperately need to collaborate with. And so, what are the solutions to all of these problems? Because there are solutions. And the first solution, really critically, is including people with disabilities in training and design. There's a quote here from someone who works in the AI field that I really admire, which is that if the data includes bias, the algorithm will copy that bias. You can't tell it to not be biased because it doesn't understand what bias is. A quote from Janelle Shane, who runs the excellent AIweirdness.com website. If you are ever interested in looking more into how AI systems can fail when they are asked to do unexpected things or when they are presented with unexpected data. I also highly recommend her book, You Look Like a Thing and I Love You, which is an incredible book that really goes into how AI systems actually work, the assumptions that they make, and how those assumptions can lead us to poor conclusions that are poorly understood and where the AI system is not actually doing the thing that we expect it to be doing. So how do we do this? We need to make sure that people with disabilities are accurately and fully represented in training data. That goes with things like Google is running Project Euphonia, which aims to collect data from those whose speech, due to their physical challenges or their status, may sound different from the speech that is included in some of the standard training data sets. It also includes, for example, the Orbit, Object Recognition for Blind Image Training dataset. And that is crucial because one thing that people quickly realized when they were trying to develop AI systems in order to aid those of us with visual impairments in accessing visual data and in accessing the visual world, the picture that I take of someone who is completely blind, my photos are not going to look like the photos taken by someone with good vision. My photos are going to be askew. They might be upside down. They might be out of focus. They might be poorly lit. They might be too dark. They might be blown out. And so if we are going to create AI systems that are suitable for giving us these positive wins, it is really important that we are training them on the data that we expect them to see. And of course, we have to be including accessibility needs in models. We cannot train an AI to serve the needs of people with disabilities if we don't give it any information about these differing needs and about these differing disabilities. Does media have transcriptions? Does it have audio descriptions? What accessibility features does a game include? Does an image have alt text? Is an app in an app store accessible? In order to make AI-based recognition systems accessible, we need to empower the people who are receiving these recommendations to be able to say, I would only like to receive recommendations for movies with audio descriptions, apps that are accessible to voiceover, and games that can be played by someone without vision. Because if I can't do that, then my needs are just going to be completely overwhelmed by everyone else's, and my recommendations will never be all that useful to me. And of course, we need to take people with disabilities into account during data collection. It's about more than just trying to figure out, are we including these people in the training data? It's about how are we collecting this data? Is the survey that we are giving accessible? Is the data collection method fully and completely accessible? Because if it is not, we are going to find that people who would like to be included in accessibility and in data collection are not going to be able to participate, are not going to be able to volunteer their data, and their data will therefore not be present, and their voices will be locked out completely. Of course, do analyzation methods account for minorities and minority groups and not average them away? Too often when we are engaged in mass data collection, there is a temptation to say, well, let's take all of this data and let's get rid of the outliers. Let's get rid of the outlying 2% or 5% or whatever so that we can make sure that our data is clean and is reflective of the majority. Or we tend to take all of this data and we tend to say, let's average it. And so let's make sure that we are getting AI systems and that we are training on data that is closest to the average. And of course, what happens there is that people who are part of minority groups, whether that is racial minorities or ethnic minorities or sexual orientation minorities, or key to this presentation and to this conference, people with disabilities, the data that was collected from us is once again erased and our voice is deleted. There is an excellent book called The End of Average that I highly recommend to all of you that deals with this data collection problem and that deals with the problems inherent in the way that we handle the data that we've collected, in the way that we average out the voices of minority groups. There is also We Count by Judith Travanis. She does great work and great speaking and great thinking about how this applies to, for example, the data and the models that are created by self-driving cars, and how this will affect the ways that AI interacts with people, not just in the digital world and in our digital spaces, but how it has direct effects on the physical world. And of course, has care been taken to avoid giving artificial intelligence systems data that they could then use to reinforce some of our already existing biases? As an example, when it comes to the hiring processes, a lot of AIs were trained. They were specifically not given data about ethnicity. They were specifically not given data about sexual orientation or about disability. However, what they were given was postal codes. And so the AI immediately learned to be biased against people from postal codes that had a large population of poor users, or of people in poverty, or of people who are part of various minority groups. Because if we are not very careful with the data that we are giving the AI and with the previous decisions that we are giving it that we would like it to learn from, AI is always going to find ways to reinforce the biases that we have now. And you know, that can be kind of scary. There is a concept that is being frequently popularized that is called math washing. And it is this idea that, oh, we didn't give the AI any data whatsoever about bias, and so we didn't give it any data about disability, so obviously the results that it comes to when it picks candidates for our jobs, or when it invigilates our exams, or when it picks people to go to university, those have to be unbiased, right? It was done by math. It was done with a computer. AI doesn't have biases. But we need to acknowledge the hundreds of places where AI systems can pick up on and can learn biases from other pieces of data. Or, of course, similar to what I was saying, the YouTubes and the Spotifys and the Apple Podcasts could begin to look at the content and the subject matters that someone is consuming and can say, oh, well, these people all fall into this cluster, and now we're going to reuse this data about the person to present them certain advertisements, or even worse, to intentionally not present them certain advertisements and certain pieces of information. And of course, the next solution that we need to get into is very similar to any other kinds of developments. When we are humans writing code and writing web pages, we need to be constantly doing inclusive testing that involves people with disabilities, that involves people who use assistive technology. Because if we don't do these things, we know that we are going to find errors, that we are going to, we are not perfect. We are going to unintentionally exclude people. However, how much worse is this when we are working with a system, for example, that we didn't necessarily code? Instead of coding it, what we did is we set a machine learning system loose on something. And so we now don't necessarily know what it has learned. We don't necessarily know the algorithm and the checklists and the guidelines that a machine learning system has created for itself. And so it is even more difficult for us to say, oh, this thing will absolutely work for everybody. We can't even do that for the web pages and the code and the things that we ourselves have developed. And so how much more is it critical to include the voices and the experiences of people with disability in the AI testing process so that we can ensure this is happening? Right now, unfortunately, while there is some examples of AI being better trained on people with disabilities that I have cited previously, this part of it is not happening right now in the industry. Exam proctoring companies that use AI to judge hiring interviews, right now, if you ask them, if you look at the white papers, if you look at the research, not only are they not thinking about this, they don't have any data about how these systems are working for people with disabilities. They are just assuming that it is fine and that people are not at a disadvantage. And maybe, to be fair, maybe that is true. Maybe someone who is blind, an AI-based system that invigilates my exams is doing just fine. The problem is we don't know. Similarly, only third-party organizations are tracking and publishing data about the accuracy of voice recognition and transcription, not just for AI and for artificial intelligence, but also for minority groups, for ethnicity groups that may be different, for people of differing gender and age groups, for people who speak a little bit differently. This is something that should be tracked and researched and published, not just by third-party think tanks and by universities. This is something that it is critical for first-party implementers of AI-based systems to do. Because we can't improve until we know where we are right now. There are other problems with inclusive testing. Not only are we not tracking the real-world data about how AI systems are performing for people with disabilities, but we are not including people with disabilities in the early testing process. When an organization decides it is going to implement a cool new AI system that is going to increase efficiency, that is going to make everything better for everyone, we need, at that point, to be including people with disabilities in the process. We need to be able to say in our procurement process, in our implementation process, hey, this AI is 99.8% accurate for people without disabilities, but when a disability gets involved, oh boy, it's only 62% accurate. Maybe we should hold off on implementing this system. Similarly, there is a temptation in the AI industry that is happening a great deal, which is to say that an AI system intended for one purpose can now be reused for another purpose that is entirely and completely different. There are some examples of this that are pretty easy to point to. First of all, systems that are being used in order to train search engines to identify photos and to make images that are searchable are suddenly being reused in order to train and in order to describe photos for people with disabilities. So what are some of the problems there? Well, some of the early AI systems that were intended to automatically add alt text for people who are visually impaired were just giving descriptions like, hey, this photo contains tree, person, snow, which is not really a great description. There's a lot of different context. Is the person chopping down the tree or hugging the tree? It's important to know. But that description is real great if you're just using the system in order to make an image searchable. Someone can type in winter tree or person with tree and find that image, but it is not fit for the secondary purpose that it's being put to. Similarly, you may have read a lot of articles recently about language models and about biases that we are encountering in language models. And that is because of this idea that we can take one single giant language model and we can use it for purposes as diverse as creating text for a game and writing professional business letters and writing novels and doing sentiment analysis and detecting spam and banning bad actors and all of these different things that have wildly different success cases, that have wildly different tolerance for bias, where bias is indicated in wildly different ways, and where the harms or the goods that are done are incredibly different. We need to start thinking about each problem as unique. And before we just decide that, hey, this is a model that describes photos, let's use it for every possible reason that a photo description could be needed, we need to start to think about what are the different challenges for each of these objectives and how should we be optimizing this AI model to work better in these different contexts, and what is the success metric for these different contexts, and how are we testing it, and how is that testing involving people with disabilities to make sure that the success metric is the same for them as it is for everyone else. And of course, once we have done the inclusive training, gotten that training data, made sure that it's been included, that it hasn't been averaged away, that it hasn't been drowned out, and once we have done the testing to make sure that people with disabilities have been included before an AI model is even rolled out or implemented, we need to start talking about inclusive implementation. Because the way that an AI model is implemented can also have drastic information and drastic effects on how effective a system is. And one of the key things about inclusive implementation is ensuring that people understand the limitations of the AI systems they depend on. As an example, Google has begun starting to create, they call sort of model cards. And they're almost like a nutrition label for an AI system that talks about the limitations of the AI model, the things that it can do and the things that it can't do. And that is critical, not just for the implementers of a system, but how much more critical is it for a person with a disability to understand the limitations of a system that they are using, that they are implementing, that we are implementing into our daily lives, into our everyday tasks. Those limitations can include limitations around accuracy. I'm sure you all remember back in the day, language translation was a really new thing, and it was so incredible and amazing and exciting. And here in Canada, we get French classes. And I know in the States, you probably get Spanish classes. And what was the first thing that you thought to do when you were a student? Well, let me write my Spanish or my French assignment in English, and I'm just going to have it automatically translated. I'm sure that'll be fine, and I'll get a great mark. No, that wasn't the case. And that happened because you are working with a system that you do not understand in order to do something where the outcome, you as a non-French speaker or a non-Spanish speaker, cannot judge. Similarly, when a blind person asks an AI to identify currency, to identify faces, to assist with travel, to describe an image, to lay out a scene for us, I, as someone who am completely blind, am unable to judge the accuracy of that system. And so not only is it important, as many AI apps already do, give me disclaimers about, well, this is an AI system and it's not going to be perfect. It is also important when we are implementing these AI systems to make sure that we are passing on confidence data to a user. Because right now, a transcript, if it is 99% sure that what I said was accurate, or if it is 63% sure that it is getting what I said as accurate, it will display the same wrong transcript. There is no color coding in order to give people an idea of, well, maybe the word that the AI system is only 50% confident about should be highlighted in red. And maybe the image description that is being offered to somebody who is blind that is, only 60% confident, maybe it should just say, well, we're 60% confident that this is a $10 bill, but we need a better photo to get to 100% confidence, so that people can be sure the information that they are getting from these systems is actually useful, and so that we, as people with disabilities, are given the agency that we need to collaborate with these AI systems and to make decisions that are reasonable and safe for ourselves. And of course, the next part of inclusive implementation is making sure that we are providing fallbacks for these AI systems. Because the AI system is going to fail, unfortunately. We are not at a place where we have AI that is as flexible as a person, that can be guaranteed to do the right things at all times. And so we need to plan for the failure, because, failing to plan is planning to fail. And how much failure can be offset by simply making a plan for that failure, by admitting, understanding, and embracing that sometimes this is going to fail. So what does that look like? It looks like making sure that all of our platforms, whether they are meeting platforms or video platforms or podcasting platforms, give the opportunity to allow for manual transcription when the AI system is failing. And of course, this can even be tied in to the confidence systems that, wouldn't it be great if when I was speaking in a meeting, the AI system could prompt me and could say, hey, we're only, 42% sure that we transcribed that last thing you said correctly. Before you publish the video, before you put out the recording, maybe go in and have a look at this. I think that is something that people would be willing to do if they understood that sometimes the AI system will fail and could be alerted to when that failure is happening. Similarly, those who have difficulty speaking, who have challenges that mean that an AI system cannot understand them, need to be presented with fallbacks. Yes, the eventual ideal world is that the AI system is going to work for every single person all of the time. But unfortunately, right now, today, that's not realistic. And that is not happening. And so how can we work around that? Well, we can make sure that we're providing text-based inputs for our home assistants. That the app, whether it's the Siri as is available, the Google Home, the Amazon app, allow people to type to their home assistant. And that will give them a way that, hey, if the AI system isn't working, I can work around it. Similarly, there is becoming more and more of a dependence on having AI systems automatically add alt text to images. And in some systems now, we are seeing the AI manually describe everything, and there is absolutely no ability to provide manual alt text for images. And of course, whether it's proctoring, whether it's employment interviews, all of these things, we need to have a system so that humans are frequently reviewing the outputs of this system, are frequently looking over it, and can step in and can intervene when the AI gets it wrong in a way that will not affect the person taking the exam or the person doing the employment interview. Because, if we can do this, if we can get this right, AI has the incredible opportunity to make the world a better place, not just for people without disabilities, but it has the opportunity to provide exponential improvement in access, in efficiency, in ability for people with disabilities. But to get there, we need to ensure that co-design is happening in every stage, and that all of these things are happening so that everyone can experience these enormous wins that are available. Because the journey is just starting. The best time to build an accessible foundation is right now. We are at the forefront of a brand new technology, and if we begin thinking these things and having these thoughts, we can build the world that we would like to see. That said, I'm sure there are questions. I would love to answer any questions that folks have and that folks have gotten into that Q&A.
All right, awesome presentation, Sam. Let's get into those questions. So first off, this is from Sarah. They say, thanks for this talk. It's been one of my favorites yet. Do you think the good of collecting assistive technology usage outweighs the risks, for example, to privacy?
You know what I really think? I think that is not my choice to make. I think the choice that is right for me is not going to be the choice that is right for you. And that's why it is so critical that we have systems that allow people to opt in to this kind of data collection. In some experiences, for example, when I'm playing a game, I am happy to provide that information and to opt in. However, when I am applying for life insurance, maybe not so much. I think that is a choice that needs to be provided to every user in every different context where they encounter. Because for some people, providing their assistive technology for training is going to be the right choice for some of the time. And sometimes it is going to be wrong, it is going to be dangerous, and it is going to be risky. So ensuring that people know that this data collection might be happening and that they have been given not an opt-out choice, an opt-in choice, so that we can all make the decision that is right for us at this particular individual time.
Excellent. Yes, that's a really good distinction to make. Okay, next question here. From the consumer perspective, do you have any recommendations for us to leverage our voices effectively in order to make AI-based products and services more accessible?
As a consumer, we get the opportunity to vote with our wallets. And so one of the things that I always make sure to do is, if there is a particular AI system that is doing a great job in recommending things to me, to make sure that I am devoting not only my money, but my time and my energy towards interacting with that system, as opposed to a system that is serving me poorly. The other thing that we as consumers can do is talk about it. I think too often we look at an AI system that is recommending us irrelevant things and a system that is showing us irrelevant ads, and we think, well, that's just the way it's been. That's the way it's always been. And it doesn't have to be that way. We as consumers should be talking about it, whether it's on social media, whether it's with our friends, whether it's with our employer, whether it's with the services that we use. We should be making sure that they know and understand, hey, the decisions that your AI is making are not good for me, and I would like it to make better decisions. Only when we do this outreach and when we do this advocacy will we start to see the change that we want to see.
Love that. Well said. All right, I think we are at our time limit here, but I just want to say thank you again, Samuel, for a wonderful presentation, and thank you everybody for your great questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all, but I appreciate you attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your AxeCon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Love to connect with all of you on LinkedIn if you'd like to continue the conversation.
Awesome.